Hey, what's up guys, how's it going? So we're going to be talking about the 5 reasons why you should save your backed resources. So to begin with, alright, if you are trying to save your backed resources, you should not be using them at all. And the only time I think you should ever really use them is if you're in a bind. Now, of course, I'm sure some of you guys are probably thinking, but why? Now, here are the 5 reasons why I think that ought to be the case. So, if you're trying to build troops, okay, I know it's the first things first. Obviously you can notice that when it's 5 million a pop versus 180k a pop, it doesn't sound so bad building 180,000 every now and then. That's not too bad. It's pretty cheap. But by the time you get to tier 4, you're gonna find yourself in a situation where your backed resources are gonna literally go gone at that rate. So my suggestion is that you do not use your backed resources for this reason, because frankly you will run out way too often, and frankly it's not effective. All right, not a good reason to be using those backed resources. So find alternatives, steal your resources, or get a higher production, get a hyper, or if you really are struggling and you need to find another way, then don't ask your guild mates. Okay, you need to be able to scout and look for the people that have resources. Easiest thing to do. All right, now second reason is obviously when gold becomes an issue, that's probably when you're starting to do those heavier, more expensive researches. Or example, like if you start doing the army offenses, even in the military tree, you'll find that it kind of immediately turns expensive. And we're talking millions expensive, all right? And in my impression of that, you definitely shouldn't use backed resources for that either. In fact, the only time you should really ever consider using backed resources is if you're in a bind. And that might mean, if you need to heal and you need to heal quick, all right? In my experience, if anything, you should really focus on using those backed resources only as a precautionary measure. Otherwise, you should be using them to continue up your cargo and just keep adding to the existing amount of backed resources that you already have. Now, of course, what is the third reason? Right? What exactly else could there possibly be? Well, obviously, use resources to make resources. That's the logic. But if you're trying to build your buildings and you're just making them in a bunch, yeah, don't be using your backed resources for that. And here's why. Because again, you'll often find yourself in a situation where not having any resources absolutely sucks. Okay, but not only does it suck, but if you lose your troops, then it sucks even more, because the only thing at that point you can do is wait. Unless you can find a way to get resources. That's really it. I mean, frankly, you're actually kind of a duck in the water. It's not a good place to be. But of course, I will say this. All right, if anything, all right, the fourth reason is that you shouldn't be using your backed resources. And the reason why is because a lot of the time people neglect it. But if anything, all right, if you were to use your alley production and use that consistently, you shouldn't need to use your backed resources. But most importantly, right, is that if you are using your backed resources consistently, you're going to eventually find yourself in a situation where you don't have any. And that's not a good thing, especially seeing as how people nowadays, they're taking the resources that they've got now, they turn around and they trade their resources in return for more speed ups. They turn around and they trade it for other stuff. There's nothing really wrong with that, but I cannot help but point out that if you are regularly trading off your resources, just know that, if you're using your backed resources, you kind of are, in some sense, taking the wealth of, trouble times away from yourself. It's not a good thing to do. I mean, in my experience, you only need to use them in times of absolute desire and need. And really, that's the only time you need to use them. But of course, the fifth reason is because the only other way you can really get resources in this game and get them in large quantities is by stealing them. And to be honest with you, if you don't have the troops, you can't continue the escapade. Now, in my experience, if you're trying to do heavy researches and you're trying to do tier 4, you're trying to do all these things, you're going to thank me later down the road when you do have those resources in the bags and that you don't use them, because down the road that the next time you get hit, you've got something to use them for, because odds are you're probably going to need them for healing. And now I point this out because the one thing that I find to be the most expensive thing imaginable is your healing costs. And the one thing I will stress to you is that you should not use your bagged resources if you don't have to. Because if you can steal them from somebody else, do it. It's just easier. It just is. Because in the end, by having those bagged resources and the times that you absolutely need them, or if somebody else in your guild needs them, it's there. It's just nothing more than an emergency fund, and that's how I treat them. Now, of course, I'm sure some of you guys out there are probably thinking, but, well, I use them for everything. Why exactly do I need to be using them for all these different reasons that you're suggesting? Well, look, all right, if you begin to use your bagged resources outright all the time, you cannot do merging packs, and that's a problem for familiar boosting. It's obviously a problem for any constructions you ever do. It's a problem if you start doing research. It's a problem if you start doing troops. And frankly, you don't want to be that guy who cannot do anything because he doesn't have the resources. So hopefully, by taking the advice that I suggested to you, you can keep those bagged resources and you'll never find yourself in this situation ever, because it is not something you want to be in. But needless to say, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time.